The Berlin Conference, which is also known as the Scramble of Africa, that took place in 1884 to 1885, was a sitting of Europeans deciding on who's going to own which part of Africa. And today we're here trying to reconcile what had happened almost, I don't know, 3 centuries to 4 centuries ago, to make sure that we have a better Africa. My name is Isasi Pingosi Mdingi, and today I am your host here on Wesley Guild, as we'll be conversing about opening of African borders, the advantages and disadvantages. Today I have 2 amazing ladies, Agcobile Ndukwana and Kudzai Mhepo, which I both know personally because we're together at Forte. And I know they're gonna do justice in this topic. And I've invited, or rather had a conversation with them to have this conversation because they have both spoke strongly on the issue, which has come out after the MEC from Limpopo went viral for a video where she was speaking to a patient, which highlights some of the difficulties we currently face as a continent when it comes to borders, having illegal migrants crossing over, and which begs the question around open borders, which give us a platform to say we can have free movement and free migration. Agcobile and Kudzai, thank you so much for taking your time to grace us here at the Wesley Guild SA and have a conversation with us. Welcome. Hi, Agcobile.
Thank you, Isa, for welcoming us. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Can you guys
Kudzai?
hear me?
Yes, but there's a bit of a glitch. Kudzai, can you hear me? Kudzai, you're on mute.
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening, guys. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for taking your time. Sis Agco, can you try again?
Hi.
Okay, we're good. Both of you, I can now hear you. Our conversation is live on the Wesley Guild SA, which has a huge following. So we'll have the conversation, and then we'll also have questions and answers from that side, and you guys can answer us. Firstly, before we dive deep into the technicalities of the conversation, can I have your view? I'll go first with you, Agco, on the video of the MEC, and what are your views after what divided the country over the past 2 weeks?
Look, I understand why it would divide the country, right? Because the topic itself, I think the country is divided. And I think part of the reason why the country is divided, we have an element of wanting to be popular, you know, and we have an element of detaching ourselves from unpopular views. And also there's also another element to it where people are not knowledgeable about the impact that illegal immigrants actually have. So I always say to people, you need to detach your emotions from when you are having conversations around resources, especially economical resources. And that is where the issue is. I understood what the MEC said, and I am in support of what the MEC said, or the theme around it. What I am not, because I'm a human and I love people and I believe in Ubuntu, I do not believe that was the platform to talk about it. Or maybe the platform was fine, but maybe that wasn't the manner to address it. And I also understand that we've been massaging this topic for quite some time, and as a result, there's an element of frustration, and there's this need to be stern in saying it. But I always believe you can be stern and firm without you offending or insulting anyone. So there's an element of Ubuntu that was lacking from what the MEC did, but I do not want to judge, because I understand what it means to be frustrated due to the lack of resources and the fact that she wanted to create an awareness. I don't know if you've been following it, but she's been going around with videos being taken. So I think the reason why she addressed it in that manner, that was a platform for her to create an awareness, to say, we are taking a firm, like as an MEC, I am taking a stand against this. It is unfortunate that humans have to be collateral damage, you know, and that's unfortunate. Someone needs to be collateral damage in order for us to fix what is broken. And that's just that. I am in full support of what she was saying. I'm in full support of the idea of saying, let's take a stand as a country to say, if you're an illegal immigrant, we cannot prioritize you over our own people. There's an element of patriotism that we need to have. And that's what South Africans are shying away from, because it makes them unpopular and it makes them seem as though they are inhumane. When in actual fact, if I've got a 4-year-old child that is sick, and then you will take the resources that I have been paying for through my taxes, it's really not fair. Do you get what I mean? We can assist as far as we can, but to say that we are sacrificing our own, that's where the problem actually starts. And that is the blurred line that we are crossing as a country, because we did not tame it and we did not control it when it started. As a result, now it's actually affecting us. And if we don't fix it now, I see a war coming because of this within the country as well.
Thank you very much, Agco, for your views. I'll come after you. Kudzai, you wrote about this, and your point of view came from that. Yes, the ethics and Ubuntu around the issue, and how the MEC addressed the issue, it's something that we can look at. But you went as far as saying we need to go beyond that question and actually look as to what this means for the SADC region and for the African continent as a whole. Can you please take us through your status that you shared and where you're coming from with that view, understanding that it again caused a lot of divisions from your followers?
Yeah, it's quite a very tricky and touchy subject, because personally, I am a foreigner in South Africa, although I'm legal. I've got my permit. So I think this conversation must be addressed from two perspectives. Firstly, let's look at the conduct itself. Was it right? Was it wrong? And then there's the concept of what did she say? So when we look at the conduct itself, we know when doctors treat people, they don't treat a South African, they don't treat Zimbabwean, they treat patients. She is a doctor by profession. And what does the doctor's creed say? How should she relate? And the oath that she took. So on those bases, she was very wrong. And that we cannot overlook. And secondly, we look at her capacity as the MEC. She holds a political office. And she's got platform. She's got access to the president of Zimbabwe. She's got access to the president of South Africa. She's got access to the Minister of Health. She's got access to the Zimbabwean embassy. And she's got so much, she's got access even to the SADC. So she has the means to actually communicate her frustration there. The patient wasn't really the right person to receive that information, because the patient is just a sick person who just crossed the border to also look for medication. And you look at the South African Constitution, what does it say? It says that everybody who is in South Africa has the right to free primary health care. In the event it exceeds the primary health care, you pay. And we see her telling the patients that actually she has to pay. So now it's not necessarily that all the foreigners get free medication. I know a couple of people that have been to hospital that are actually expecting or whatever, they're actually footing the bill, they are actually paid. So the question is not necessarily that people get free, healthy services if you're a foreigner. You get to pay. That's what the law is. That's what the law says. But the question is the South African, hospitals implementing that? Are they getting payment? Are they holding the patients accountable for the accounts? That's another issue. And also, secondly, is the health facility in crisis because of immigrants? Is that the real question? Aren't there other ancillary issues such as what you call this corruption. We know there's been a lot of corruption and allegations of corruption in the health sector. It's easy to point out immigrants. And also, we want to look at immigrants as a whole. For the past 5 years that I've been in South Africa, I've been paying tax, which means I'm contributing as well to the government and the expenses. You look at every day, on a single basis, every day people cross the border just to come and buy bread. They cross the border to come and buy meat and all those kind of things. They are indirectly contributed because they pay tax when they do those services. It's not like entirely the foreigners that are coming in are not contributing to South Africa. There are some that are contributing in terms of skills. You look, we were at Fort here, there are foreign lecturers from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe and all that. As of today, they've produced teachers, they've produced lawyers for South Africa, not for their country. And they did not study even in South Africa. Most of them studied in their own countries. So to just look at that on its own, just to look at the health service and not consider other aspects, it's a bit problematic, but it's something that should be viewed from a broader perspective. But nonetheless, I understand their frustrations as well. I take into consideration the frustrations, and it is frustrating. But also, we want to look at what did she say? What was she raising? The truth of the matter is that there is a crisis in Zimbabwe. The reason why any South African can move to to China and work there. You've seen there's been an influx of South African teachers moving to China to go and teach there without the Chinese complaining. It means there is enough resources for everybody. But what we're currently facing, South Africa on its own is going through its own economic challenges. And the crisis that is in Zimbabwe is not helping, because most of the Zimbabweans are running also to South Africa, and it's causing a crisis on its own. So the economical issues in South Africa, the economical issues in Zimbabwe, both must be addressed. Then the Zimbabwe one is even worse because it needs SADC, it needs South Africa. Remember when President Thabo Mbeki was president, we went into an election, and what did they do? They knew that the ZANU-PF rigged. There were allegations of rigging of elections, but they endorsed ZANU-PF. We've had, what's her name? Dr. Zuma being the chairperson of SADC. She has seated in that chair. While there is a crisis in Zimbabwe, and they've continuously protected their fellow comrades. And what they say that Zimbabwe is a sovereign state, but you can't claim sovereignty when you're talking about Agenda 2063. You're saying we must unite, and then yet when there is a crisis, you're not willing to actually overstep that sovereignty to protect regionally sovereignty, because for the well-being of Zimbabwe matters to South Africa. As long as the political crisis that we have in Zimbabwe has not been addressed, which is the cause of the problem. If Zimbabwe's political situation is addressed, I don't think we have many of Zimbabweans coming to South Africa.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kudzai. You raised critical points, and what I want to throw in both of you is I understand the context of the minister of the MEC being in the wrong, but can we take into consideration that had the video not gone viral, the conversation would have never maybe came to the fore, because of the current crisis we have as both countries, or even as the African continent, where both young and old people are not engaging in serious issues unless there's a scandal like what happened. So isn't it unfortunate for the both countries that we need to have a scandal before we can get to have the conversation? Because the former minister, Aaron Motsoaledi, has been having this conversation while in the health ministry. He came to the Home Affairs Ministry. The conversation, he continued on it and raising the issues. But these issues were raised between the two countries, between the government spaces. There's been statements being released, but the conversation has never came to the people. Then that is the first problem that we're having. And my question would then be, as much as we're looking at the issue of the MEC being on the wrong, can we at a certain point also have a conversation around that her tactic has actually brought a conversation that even the person who was coming to the hospital to seek the health system, whom would assume at this point is an illegal immigrant, could not have a view of these underlying issues that you guys are mentioning, the economic issues and all of that. For them, they're crossing the country to find help without necessarily taking into consideration that they could be taking a space for myself and my child who's in the system, who needs help, and now they have to be the prioritization of resources.
I hear you, Isane, and it's quite unfortunate that this discussion was sparked through this rather unpopular way, né? But I don't want us to fall into the trap of only looking at Zimbabweans. Né? There's a large majority of illegal immigrants, and I think the issue that we should face here is that the core issue or the main problem is illegal immigrants. When you're an illegal immigrant, you are not accounted for anywhere in South Africa. Therefore, when we are budgeting, when we're looking at the economics behind it, we cannot really account for you and we cannot budget for you. And as it is, like as Kudzai has mentioned, currently South Africa is facing its own issues, right? We've got corruption, and corruption is across Africa as a continent. And it's important for us to have such conversations so as to challenge the powers that be in order for them to change the manner in which they're doing things. Or maybe we need to actually, I think I mentioned this before we started, that we need to start having conversations that will inspire policy changes. We cannot only want to change the status quo through voting or through watching our elders speak. We need to actually drive people and say, let us have an input in the policy changes that need to be made in South Africa. And then number one, and the unfortunate circumstance, I appreciate that we've got legal immigrants in South Africa, right? The tax system in itself is very complex. When you are not a permanent resident in South Africa, you cannot really be fully taxed as much as a resident in the country. That's one element. And people that cross the border to buy bread or to buy basics, those are zero rated, meaning that they are not charged VAT on those items. So they're not really contributing to the economy through the tax system. But I don't want us to look at the technicalities, but rather we need to be looking at the fact that as a country or as an African continent, let us fix our countries individually. South Africa is in no position currently to take on the load of other countries. Yes, it was all good and well, and it makes sense when we're having our kumbaya moments, saying Ubuntu, Ubuntu, African countries must unite. But if Zimbabwe at its state would take on the role or the responsibility to take care of some of South Africans, it would drown because it is in no capacity, it has absolutely zero capacity to take care of its own. If South Africa would take on it, because currently as it is, we are taking on other countries, we are taking on other citizens from other African countries, and we are drowning. We are not being drowned by simply those people. We are being drowned by the inadequacies within our government. Yeah? So what we should be focusing on as a country is saying, what needs to be changed in the governance of this country to ensure that we're in a position to lend a hand? Because I know for a fact that you won't really find countries where you are able to just go and do as you please, if I may put it that way. For instance, if you go to China, if you go to China and you're there and you teach as a teacher, it's probably a tax-free, depending on how it is arranged, and you have your own contribution, but you are there legally, and therefore there's a way or there's a system where the country can benefit from you, right? Whereas if you're illegal, there isn't anything but you're just adding onto the load. So when we look at the ethics and we look at Ubuntu, we look at everything else, like the philanthropy and everything beyond the economics, yes, we can support it because we want to be one. But is it possible? Do we have the resources, or are we drowning ourselves as African countries when we're taking on more than we can, when we are biting more than we can chew? And currently South Africa has bitten more than it can chew. And I know for a fact that the solutions will not come from the ANC. The solutions will not come from any of our current African leaders. The solutions will come from us. through policy changes. We need to commit and say, okay, fine, we are having these discussions. Are we having these discussions to say, okay, who acts or sounds knowledgeable, or who sounds knowledgeable, or are we having these discussions with the purpose of implementing change? I want us to leave this discussion with saying, we need to come up with a system that, as the youth, we will have a contribution towards policy changes, because we need to change policies in South Africa. Currently, the Freedom Charter, the Constitution, it only serves a select few, and we need to contribute towards the change in that. That's my stance on the situation. It's unfortunate that a video by the ANC is all that it took to spark the debate, but I felt it was necessary, and it's unfortunate that a sick person was sacrificed or was served as collateral damage in this case. But it's unfortunate, but it was necessary.
Thank you very much, Agco. Kudzai, what's your take on the technique, on the part of the ethics? You spoke on this one when you were writing your status, and I still pose the same questions. That yes, that the ethics and everything might have been there, but shouldn't we say, to a certain extent, maybe that was the only way that it could have sparked the conversation, and that's the problem. That's how problematic our countries are, especially when it comes to young people, that it only takes such for us to engage in serious conversations.
I think I've got two sentiments pertaining the video itself. Firstly, I acknowledge what it has done. It has opened up a platform for people to have the honest conversations, right? But also it has other effects, negative effects, as you saw that is a day after, or the second day after the video was released, we had people, the Dudula operation groups at the hospital, even getting to a point of asking even nurses, even South Africans, local South Africans, asking them to show their IDs. I don't think it's a good space for even a South African to be sick, at the same time should be asked to produce a an ID at the hospital and things like that. But then again, what I like about the video, I think if you listen to a follow-up interview that she had with one of those with news platforms, she said that she had to get to a point where she makes people aware, because at diplomatic level, they are failing, in as much as their conversation, they are failing to reach the necessary, they're not getting the necessary reaction, or they're not getting the necessary ear from the relevant people. So she felt the need that let's educate those people to say, you know what, this what you are doing here is affecting other people. When you leave this place, because she mentioned an issue that somebody gets treated in South Africa, then they go back home and then they tell people, no, there's this program, it's free, whatever, let's go back. They should know that those resources come at a cost and they should be prepared to pay. So I understand her frustration, that her intention, I don't know her true intention, but from what she was saying was that her intention was to conscientize people, to say in as much as there's a right to primary, whatever, free health services, there is also need to pay. It's not just entirely free. There are some services that are specifically for citizens, like this particular project. She said that it's called Rural Life Matters or something. It was specifically to benefit the South Africans that are in the rural areas. It was outside the everyday scope of health services. So such a program was set aside for South Africans. It's just not for free, and people should be able to pay. But what I like about it, it got the reaction from the Zimbabwean government. I saw that the embassy of Zimbabwe, they wrote a letter to the government of South Africa saying that they noted and they are worried. But what we're grateful is the response from the president of South Africa. He said, okay, fair enough, we have noted what you are saying, but it's time for SADC to address the concerns that the MEC is raising, which then means at least there's some light in the tunnel, if I can put it that way. It didn't come the right way, but at least there's something, and our leaders are coming to a point where they're acknowledging that there's a conversation, there are discussions, there's a problem that must be fixed, which in my own view, I believe it's the Zimbabwean government. The political situation in Zimbabwe must be fixed. Even if, even if immigrants had to go back today, the truth of the matter, people are going to still come back, whether I'm going to come back to South Africa to look for health services, whether I'm going to come back to South Africa to buy mealie meal. People, as long as there's a crisis in Zimbabwe, Zimbabweans are going to out to other African countries. They still need to address the the political problem that is in Zimbabwe. But also I want to highlight on something that Agco touched on, that each country must fix it on its own. To some extent, it is true. Every government is responsible of its citizen, right? But now the problem is we are engaging in regional integration agreements, bilateral agreements. And from what we have seen from history during liberation is that we do better working together. There is a need to cooperate. Right now, there is a political crisis actually in Zimbabwe that is causing an immigration crisis in South Africa. It needs to be addressed, and Zimbabwean people cannot do it on their own. One thing that we know is that the government of Zimbabwe is brutal. It is violent to its own citizens, and they need the help of South Africa. It might be in the name, it might be in the name of force, it might be in the name of what you call sanctions, it might be, but there is a need for the South African government, not only South Africa. We are talking about Botswana, SADC as a region, Africa as a continent. It needs to assist the people of Zimbabwe, whether it's SADC coming in and facilitating free and fair elections, whether it's them going behind scenes to talk up with the government of Zimbabwe. We saw in 2008, the AU came together and said to the people of Zimbabwe, to the government, to the leaders of Zimbabwe, why don't you guys come into a united government? And for those from 2008, we saw a massive change in the economy. We saw things becoming better. We saw our hospitals becoming better. That was an intervention of the AU. I don't think that we need to work together to some extent, in as much as governments have a primary duty to take care and protect their citizens. They also have to work in collective. Yeah, that's my contribution.
Okay, thank you, Kudzai. I love the last sentiments you had, and together with Agco. And I remember Agco once had this conversation, 2016, the AU came and say we're having a one African passport. And I remember me and you having this conversation, and you raised the same sentiments and said, we are not ready as a continent. We need to first work individually as this country. So you've been having on this stance of we need to first do it as separately and then come together and say we are opening the borders. Please elaborate on why you were critical of the one passport, where Africans can have one passport and they can move across the continent without having to necessarily apply to be in that country.
Look, the thing is, for me, I have fortunately been able to detach my emotions from what is best in terms of economic. The country cannot function without a healthy economy. When we have a very low GDP, we are experiencing problems. When we've got a high inflation rate, we will not be able to achieve anything. Now, I love the Kumbaya spirit. Let us all be one. It is all good and well. But when we are kumbaying and it is a mess. Currently, Africa is a mess. When we're being honest and we're being frank about it, Africa is a mess. Now you've got different governments within the different countries. If they're failing to be united as a government in their individual capacity, how much more when you bring in Nigeria, when you bring in Angola, when you bring in Botswana, when you bring in Africa as a whole, not even just the SADC region. But now that's why I want to caution everyone is that let us fix our problems. We have an issue with the East, like we've got South Africa, right? And then we've got the Eastern Cape. I just want to give you a typical example. You've got South Africa and then you've got the Eastern Cape. It's been years, we are yet to see development in the deep rural areas within the Eastern Cape. When you go to Komalibote and you go to other rural areas, you find that it's a whole different ball game for them. We have this civilization in other areas of the country, but when you look at other areas, it still seems as though it's as though we are still 20 years back We still have schools that haven't been built. We still have roads. We still have bridges that haven't been built. Where we've got learners that are unable to go to schools because resources don't reach those people. Now, when I say let us fix our problems, I'm not saying that South Africa will not lend a hand. I'm saying South Africa needs to stop biting more than it can chew. Lend a hand, but to a certain extent, until you have fixed your problems. Do you get what I mean? Currently, South Africa has got a crisis of access to higher education. That's just a typical example. We were doing well, and then things took a left turn due to corruption in other areas. And I'm saying there's maladministration within the country itself. Therefore, taking care of other citizens is unfortunately something we cannot realistically do. When we are being realistic and looking at the resources that we have, when we look at the government that we have, and we look at their ability and the system that they've created, it will not benefit anyone. We've got a lot of, I'll give you an example, ESCOM. I'll give you an example, South African Airways. We've got a lot of issues that we need to fix within the country before we take on the responsibility to assist other people. Lend a hand, but it must only be limited until we can be like China, for instance, and say, okay, fine, now we can outsource from the different countries and say these people must come into our country and then they can teach. It's all good and well. Now they can teach. They've got jobs that they can do because we can access their skills. I've seen the skills, and I agree with Kudzai when she says we've got their skills, but equally so, we've got South Africans that are sitting at home that are also skilled but do not have access to jobs for various reasons. But I don't want us to look at that, because our biggest issue now is that we've got an abnormal level of illegal immigrants, and those illegal immigrants are not solely coming from Zimbabwe. And that is one of our biggest problems, is that as a country we are focused on a certain group of people. We are so focused on Zimbabweans, we are forgetting we've got illegal immigrants from Nigeria as well that are creating their own mess. We've got illegal immigrants from other African countries that we need to be looking at. We need to group them as a whole. And I do understand that with the ZEP coming to an end, like on the 31st of December this year, that also obviously sparks a debate surrounding Zimbabweans. But I want us to look at immigrants as a whole and the impact they're having and the impact it's having in the economy in South Africa. Now, let's take away illegal immigrants and look at legal immigrants. When we say we are opening the borders, we are opening the borders to everyone. But do we have the capacity to do so, right? We don't. When we look at the reality, we don't. We still haven't mastered the basic things. I always make an example and say, I'm still having coffee that is produced in a different continent, yet I've got Ethiopia here in Africa. Our governments, our leaders haven't yet been able to just sort out the basics. I want us to be able to master the basics. I'm a person that believes in taking steps. Master the basics, move on to the next step. Then when I feel like we are ready, and then we are, as a government, we're like, okay, we've sorted out our systems, we've sorted out our governance, we've come up with the system, and our youth is in a position where they say, if you are corrupt, we are sick and tired of this nonsense. So until then, unfortunately, we cannot, because we are all going to drown in a hole as Africa. So we need to fix our problems, help as much as we can, but let's not overstepping, because that's what South Africa has been doing. It has bit off more than it can actually chew. And this is why we are facing these issues today.
Thank you very much, Agco. And I'll quickly move over to you, Kudzai. Looking at the law side of things, we're saying open the borders, but there's an issue that I want you to address specifically of how do you think then would work out, because we have this parts of the SADC region that were colonized by the British, parts of it by the Portuguese. You have the western side of the continent that was colonized by the French. Each part of this continent has been colonized by a different colonizer, and which brings different laws. When we're saying open border issues, we have conflicts that have not been resolved in different parts of the country, which is something you write about in your research, the conflict issues. How do we move when we're saying, okay, open border, free movement, free migration?
Okay. I think one thing that we have to come to realize is that the concept of opening borders does work. We have seen it with the EU. We have seen it with OHADA. All those, we have seen it that it actually works. But then up until Britain exited, it makes you realize that it's not a perfect system. I'm in support of opening borders, but here are the issues now. Is the concept that we're trying to adopt, because if you look at Agenda 2063, we're trying to adopt a foreign concept of opening borders to an African society, which is totally different from the EU terrain. You look at EU in terms of culture, they are very closely knitted. They all speak English. Most of them are English speaking countries. Unlike here, in South Africa on its own, we've got 11 different languages. In Zimbabwe, they are the Shonas and the Ndebeles. They haven't even come to a point where they're united under one umbrella. So there are those issues. And then we come to the issue of the economy. Let's look at how we look at SADC. Zimbabwe is totally in poverty. It's not performing economically. You look at Zambia. Zambia just started now. It's getting there. It's getting better. Botswana has been, but Botswana is more of a military state than any other thing. It's just another state on its own. And you look at South Africa. South Africa has been performing well, but now we see a decline. And when you look further into South Africa is still so segregated. You look at the type of life that when I moved from Forte, coming to UCT, coming to Cape Town, I saw a whole different life, a whole different experience altogether. The differences are still closely visible in South Africa. So now, when you say let's take a concept of the EU and we implement in Africa without taking into consideration the differences that we have as a continent, the differences that we have as a country that have not yet been fixed, it becomes problematic. Yes, we can open borders, but what's going to happen now if we open borders? The truth of the matter, everyone is going to flock into South Africa. As it is, somebody once said, we're having a discussion about this. He's like, South Africa is the mother of Africa. You find every nationality. You find a China, you find a Zimbabwe, you find a Japanese, you find everyone here in South Africa. So think about it. If we were to open borders, what's going to happen? Yet in the EU, you can open borders. Somebody who's in Sweden doesn't necessarily feel the need to come to UK. Why? Because their economies, even their infrastructure, their development are almost at the same level. They are literally up until maybe now we are seeing a shift because of the Ukrainian war, but no one wants to move to, for instance, to America. No one wants to move because they are settled in their country. Now, we cannot adopt that concept, which we come back to what Agcobile is saying, that let's fix our economics at individual basis. When our economics are almost at par, I love what's happening in Zambia. Recently, the Zambian kwacha was trading almost like at par with the rand. We are getting there. That's something. You look at the pula. That's why you don't find so many people from Botswana in South Africa. They are content in their country. Why? Because their state has all the resources and all the opportunities that they can get. So now, what makes it easy for South Africans to move to the UK? As you saw, a number of young professional South Africans are moving to the UK and go and get a job there. And the UK young people don't feel the impact is that the land is already full of opportunities. There is enough for everyone. They're even now looking for other people to come and fill up the space because there is more than enough, up until we get to a point where we address those issues. But now, what we must not forget to take into consideration is our history. What we are facing today as an African continent are the effects of colonization and the fact that we are not economically empowered as a continent. You look at the gap between the Black South Africans and the white people, it's still very much visible. And that is why even if we are to really open borders, it must start with economical emancipation. Black people must be economically empowered before we even get to the point of opening borders. Up until that has happened, up until we get to a point where we can master how to run our own economy. Let's take, for instance, Zimbabwe would have done well had the land, whatever, what you call this, the land reformation. Yes, the land redistribution, had it been implemented properly, Zimbabwe would have still done well, because what would have happened if Zimbabwe had implemented its economic change and policies regarding its economy, and it had the support of South Africa and continued to supply South Africa and continuously supply Botswana or whatever, and if Africa had supported Zimbabwe, then the situation that we have today wouldn't have actually gone into where it is economically. Now, there comes the issue, what you were saying, that we have not yet mastered the basics. But now the problem is that we have, for South Africa to be able to stand, for instance, you look, South Africa manufactures cars, right? And those cars should be sold in Zimbabwe. But what's happening at the moment, in Zimbabwe, the cars that they're getting are ex-Japanese cars. Why? Because our policies are not inclined. Right now, Zimbabwe should close its border for ex-Japs and say, no, we are not taking ex-Japanese cars. We will buy cars from South Africa. What does it do for South Africa? I mean, it has to be block by block. We can't just necessarily open borders, but let's start with economical policies. Let's work together on economical policies, because if we say every continent, every country here, we're gonna buy Coke to make chocolate from, let's say, Ghana or wherever it's coming from, then now, once the economy of Ghana is boosted, it makes then sense for them. Now we can progress to opening border. We have to start at an economical level, because I believe that the battle that is on, the war that we have, unlike our parents and our forefathers that were fighting for decolonization of Africa, what we need to do is to decolonize the economy. Once that has been achieved, then we can move. We can talk about opening border. You look at OHADA. What did OHADA do? It's one of the most successful RECs that has been integrated together. What did they do? They decolonized the economy. They made their economy one. That was the first step. Once that was achieved, it was easy to open the borders, because all the countries were performing at the same level. So let's start with decolonizing the economy. Then we move to decolonizing the politics, because for integration to happen, it needs the political willingness of states. We need to promote democracy in our African societies. That's where SADC comes in and holds its leaders and its members. That's where South Africa, as the sister, that they regard South Africa as the big sister of Africa. It has to hold Zimbabwe accountable politically before we can move on to say, let's open the border. The truth of the matter, I want to go back into my own country. I want to go back and contribute to the building of my own country as soon as I'm done with my studies. But the political instability and the economical instability does not allow me to. At the end of the day, I find myself wanting to settle in South Africa so that I can be able to help my little sister go to school. I can be able to sustain my parents as well. Because why? There is a crisis economically. There is a crisis politically. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Could you remind me of our days at Fort? I would have said Amanda when you said decolonize the economy there. We had good run there at Fort. I'll come to you right on the economic part. Part of the conversation, or why the countries have been supporting the one passport, the opening of borders. The conversation is that we're looking at Africa continental free trade area, which is the free trade. And they say the fundamental aim of this treaty is to create a single market for goods and services facilitated by the movement of persons, according to Article 3A of the agreement. Accordingly to this consequence, places free migration of person at the heart of the free trade. Are we even there yet where we could say we will build a single market as a continent, not even as SADC, but continentally build a single market?
We are not there. But it goes back to what I said initially, and what Kudzai said, is that we need to decolonize the economy within the countries first. Ne? It's the mindset. For instance, I made the example of coffee that we are not getting from Ethiopia. We should be getting coffee from Ethiopia, if you get what I mean. We should be getting oil directly from Nigeria, and we shouldn't even be impacted by what's happening in Russia and what is happening in Ukraine. Ne? So again, if we would be running a great risk if we would combine our economy and have one with the leaders that we have. It's an unfortunate situation, because one, we need policies that will protect the resources and that will protect the citizens. Because the issue now is that the resources are there, but because it is favorable to our leaders to actually import things for whatever reasons that they have, it's political reasons and personal economical wealth, then what happens is we will be in a situation where as a country as a continent, we fall into a hole. So what we need to do first, we need to have policies in place. And I'm emphasizing on policies because we need our resources to be protected from us, from our greed, because our biggest issue is that the resources are there, but the distribution of the resources is the issue. We've got the distribution of resources that is favorable to certain people due to greed. And Ukudzi touched on the issue of Black people being emancipated economically. We currently have policies in place that protect the resources that are within white people. We will not get, as Black people, we will not get access to those resources, and those resources will not be distributed equally or fairly if there aren't any policies in place that will ensure that. So before we even have a single market, we need to say, how are we fixing the problem in South Africa, where you find that 30% of the population owns 70% of our land. When you're driving down the garden route, you find gates everywhere on our land because the land is owned by white people. You find a single white person will own 10% worth of land. And then you need to ask yourself, how is it that you own this land? Who gave it to you? You are not even from here, and that's the reality. You find that so-and-so is sitting in Germany and he owns land, not just a small piece of land, but a large piece of land in South Africa. And that is where the issue is. We need policies in place that will say, okay, fine, this is what you need. So we need our resources to be redistributed to the people, which is us, the people that have rights to it, number one. Number two, then we need policies that will protect the maladministration, or the misuse of these resources by us. Because I feel like as much as the resources will be redistributed fairly, but still we are faced with a situation or a risk that says, but then again, what if these resources are misused and they are not used for the betterment of the country? Then we need policies that will protect. So again, I am emphasizing on policy change. We need policies, and these policies will come from us. Those ones that are already at the top, they will not formulate any policies that will protect us. Then when we've mastered that, and we are able to say, okay, as South Africa, we have mastered the art of being able to import from African countries, where we say, I am not going to buy Nescafe. I refuse to buy Nescafe. And it needs to be, because we also need to be decolonized as well as the citizens of South Africa, to say, you will not buy something from Belgium. You buy chocolate that has been manufactured in a, okay, fine, we will buy export to them. If we master that on an individual basis, then surely we can say, okay, fine, now we can have a single market. But then again, have policies in place to protect, because part of the reason why there is an unequal distribution of resources is because there aren't any policies protecting the citizens of this country. And we don't really have access as young people or as the citizens to say, Ramaphosa, what you're doing is wrong, and we are going to hold you accountable. We can only hold him accountable in our own little corners. But what policies are there in place that give us the right to actually hold him accountable, other than a voting system that we've seen recently as well, it is also becoming corrupt. So it's again, we need to formulate policies, and these policies need to come from us, because we are the ones that are mostly disadvantaged by what is happening. Once we've mastered that, then we can have a single market. Then everybody is going to kumbaya, will be happy for life, and then die happily ever after. So that's what I think.
Oh, I wish for such a time. I wish for such a time. Kudzai, I'm gonna come to you lastly. This will be a last question to your side, again on the issue of the free Africa trade and single market, but from a law perspective, where do we stand as a continent? How feasible it is that we can move to that area?
I believe that that's basic. It will happen with time, because if you read the imaginary letter that Dr. Zuma Dlamini wrote to Kwame Nkrumah, she talks about the united Africa, but it's not something that can wake up and happen today. Why? Because of all those issues that we're talking about, our internal issues. Our internal issues need to be addressed. Once our internal issues have been addressed, or there are policies in place, it's easy. Once we have a policy, let's say South Africa has an, a democratic policy that it implements at political level. It's easy to bring in, and Botswana has one, Zimbabwe has one, and everyone has. It's easy then to come up with one that suits everybody else, that can address the rest of Africa. Honestly, Agenda 2063, it's too soon for us to be looking at happening. I don't know if it will happen in our lifetime, but we should be getting to a point where we are building towards it. It starts at policy level, like what Agco is saying. It starts with such discussion to say, okay, can we, and being honest with each other, can we open the borders? But we can't open the borders until Mnangagwa has fixed this country. That's where we need to get back to. We need to start with the basics and being honest with where we are and where we are going. We cannot open the borders until the economy of Zimbabwe has been revived. We cannot open the borders until the people of South Africa themselves, among themselves, are unified. We cannot open the borders when Eastern Cape needs to be developed to be at the same level as Cape Town. It needs to happen. It has to be at par with Western Cape. The services that we get, we cannot open the borders until the University of Cape Town has the same services as the University of Fort Hare. Fort Hare has to be upgraded to get to that point. Then once that is done, because what's going to happen, we're going to open the borders, and then everyone else is going to flock, whether we're flocking to to Western Cape, where everything, or we're flocking to Johannesburg, where everyone is there and everything is developed, which means that who will develop Eastern Cape? Who's going to develop Zimbabwe? In as much as you see what's happening at the moment, you've got, in Zimbabwe, there's a crisis. All the nurses are leaving for the UK, which is understandable. They're looking for greener pastures, and UK is actually recruiting. New Zealand is recruiting all the professionals from Africa, Zimbabwe, everywhere. UK is recruiting professionals. Some of the lawyers that we learned with have left. Some of the people that we started with are teaching in China and leaving us with the crisis, because you go back right now in our schools, who's teaching the next generation? So now we have issues to address before we even start, because we should be able to be in a place where I say, I don't want to leave Zimbabwe, I want to contribute. But right now, everyone given a chance, they want to move to Europe. Why? Because there is a crisis within our society. So we need to build towards Agenda 2063, but it will only happen once we have fixed these things that's making young people leave, those things that are making Zimbabwe flock into South Africa, this thing that is making people that are university graduates to leave Africa and go and be nurse aides in the UK. Those people with degrees, people with education degrees, they're moving to UK to do that. Why? There is a crisis in Africa, and it starts at policy level, and those things need to be addressed. Once that is need, you'll be very surprised. There won't even be the need to open the border, because no one will want to leave their country. Very funny enough, we'll talk about opening borders and free continental trade for purposes of what you call this, for economical reasons, to say, okay, when we go and trade with the EU, we now, if we go as Africa, we've got more bargaining power. If we go as Africa, we've got more resources. But now, if our national issues are addressed that are affecting the youth, that are affecting the old people addressed, you find that they want even the need, the desire. The UK left the EU, but it hasn't affected their population. It hasn't affected their people. They are still there. They are living. Life is continuing as usual. Why? Because even if they want to move out of the UK, and they can still get it, they've got efficient systems. They'll apply for a permit. They get a permit. They travel to wherever, because the systems in place are inclined. In as much as they've moved out of the EU, the policies that are binding, even the immigration rules and everything that are in place, even the systems that are in place makes it easy. For instance, if there is no corruption in the Department of Home Affairs of South Africa, starting at the border there, the issue of illegal immigrants will be limited. The reason why people are coming in is because there is somebody who's allowing them. Whether it's at the border, whether it's by the fence where there are soldiers, there is somebody who's allowing, because one issue is when somebody leaves Zimbabwe, there are soldiers that guide the no man land. There are also soldiers that guide the no man land from the South African perspective. So now, how are people managing to come through? Because even if you swim through the Limpopo, when you get to the other side, there is a fence that is patrolled by soldiers. Where as soon as you leave the Beitbridge border, there is a roadblock. I think there are about 5-6 roadblocks where a police officer comes in and checks your passport, checks if it has been stamped, and checks if you've got a permit. So what's happening? When if you're walking in Johannesburg, you bump into immigration officers that say, if they identify you as a foreigner, they want to look at your passport. Are you here illegal? But then what's happening? There is corruption in all those places. And this is what's enabling the crisis. Up until our policies address those single legal issues, you'll find that once our economical issues are addressed, once our political issues are addressed, no one would desire to even opening the borders and closing them won't make any difference, actually. Yeah.
Ladies, thank you very much. This was an eye-opening conversation on the broader issues. There's been a call to axe the MEC by certain political parties because she's not doing well for the country. So yeah, we there. But just to read 2 comments, there's one from Godfrey that let's stop making excuses for ANC. You can't say budget is exhausted due to foreigners, whereas the same department is experiencing so much corruption. And there's Buyambo. First, we need to be proud of what is made in Africa, while we still praise what is made from West. We'll be singing the same song. So the conversation is still the same. We need to really look into the policy and what this means for the rest of us. Yes, we might want to be one Africa, one united Africa, but the feasibility of it, is it really something that we can do as a continent? And when I was reading on the Open Africa Trade and also one passport, actually countries like South Africa are really reluctant on that because I think they do understand the implications. There's a lot of wars across Africa, the displacement of people, and it means they're all gonna flock down into the continent and into South Africa and into the SADC region. So from that, ladies, thank you very much for your time. I think there needs to be more of this conversation. We need to really have a broader conversation in the little parts of it, what policies look like. And I think the Methodist Church has been one of the biggest churches in the African, in the SADC region, because this is a connectional page. It goes up to Botswana, Swaziland. We need to really have the conversation of, are we really doing enough? And looking at the South African society, the Christian side of things dominates. So the churches, the traditional side of things really need to come into the conversation and not shy away from being unpopular. I've taken note, Sis Agcobile, to say that we like being popular. And I think that's what happened with the MEC thing. People canceled the MEC without really looking into the conversation. and how, yes, the person might have been unfortunate, but I still feel that even with the address of the MEC, she was not being disrespectful to anyone, but rather addressing an issue in the most polite way. But people, obviously, we're here, we're South Africans, we want to look like the saviors. But anyway, from anyone who tuned in from at home, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for tuning in. I hope the conversation continues. The questions that have been raised, you continue the conversation. I hope this becomes a conversation starter. It's not a solution because we've not discussed the policies that need to be there. We have not discussed how the economy should be decolonized, but this is a conversation now at different parts. And actually, this is something I want to have a conversation with some of the students that I encounter that are in economics, that when they're writing their proposal, look at decolonization of the economy. How do we decolonize the economy? And thank you very much for that side. Anyway, from me, Isasi Ngosi, and my two amazing ladies who are saying good night, and the economy still needs us. Hey guys, we must really have this conversation. Petrol is killing all of us. Tax is killing all of us. We need to really have the conversation really fast and really quick. Thank you very much, ladies. From the Facebook side, we have been logged out. We are looking out from the live and also the okay, why is my live not going off? Okay, just a second.
We still live.
Yes, I'm trying to log out from that. I don't know why is my phone, but the recording has stopped. So at least we don't have a problem with that one. Okay. Wow. Technology is not being nice on me today. Why is my phone not? Maybe it wants us to continue the conversation. Maybe we stopped when we're supposed to not have stopped. Maybe let me just end it from the side. Maybe. But anyway, ladies, thank you very much for your time. I'll just end the conversation, and then it ends from that side.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Bye.